and welcome back to another episode of Market Like a Mother. And today we're going to be talking about a different type of topic here. So, kind of looking at a founder and their team. We're going to be looking at how a founder evolves as their team grows. Going to be discussing, when it's time to bring in a team, what it looks like hiring a team, and we're going to be chatting with Karen today here, founder and CEO of Radiant, to kind of talk about her founder story a little bit too, as the founder of Radiant. So, hey, Karen, how are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. I am excited to kind of hear a little bit more about your thoughts on this topic because I obviously joined the Radiant marketing team a little later, in the day. We already had a full established team. We were a few years in. So I'm really eager to hear kind of how you got started with hiring this team, building this team, and kind of how you knew it was time to bring on new team members.
Yeah, and I know like in your intro you mentioned how like teams evolve and stuff, and obviously this is like my story. You're going to be contributing your story, and everyone's story is a little bit different. So I think that's an important caveat is take what you learned from this that like resonates with you and leave the rest behind. But yeah, so Radiant started in 2015, and I had an interesting start because I was actually transitioning from another agency. So I started right away my Radiant agency with a couple of team members. So it was a little bit different than like starting that from scratch. My original agency, I started with a business partner, so that was going into it like a partnership, which was again like not completely solopreneur on my own. So I think that right away, like with those two experiences in mind, I definitely envisioned like I would have a team at some point. So I think I was setting the foundation to grow to some degree, which started me on the path of creating some of the things that you need to scale and grow your business. But Lauren, I'm curious with you too, because you're obviously a content creator running your own brand as well. When you started doing, when you first started doing your videos and getting your content out there, did you have like a vision of what the future might look like and if you would have a team?
I never imagined I'd have a team. Like I feel like I look at like a business like Radiant and I'm like, of course they have a team, but for some reason I like never applied that same principle to me doing content, as a solopreneur as we call it. But I think for me at least the moment when I was like, oh, I need a team was like when you notice things slipping, like when
Yeah.
you're like physically and mentally like incapable of doing everything yourself anymore. Like I definitely had those moments where I was spread thin and I was like, okay, like it's no longer a single person operation. Like we need to expand. So again, I know a little different for you, like coming into Radiant with a full team, but it definitely, I think definitely evolved kind of my role, bringing in other people. I'm curious though, like for you, obviously, like you came and you were started Radiant, you already had people on your team, but as you've been expanding, like, do you think it's caused your role and kind of what you do at Radiant now to evolve on a day to day?
Oh my gosh, so much. Like if we were to jump ahead because it's been 10 years to like where we're at now. I mean, I think a lot has stayed the same, but a lot has changed as well. I mean, there's still I think what's hard too is balancing the information you're consuming from say like consultants and leaders in this space with like what applies to your own company. Like I said at the beginning, what we're talking about today might resonate or not, and I think it's like distilling that information to understand what you need to be doing. So, for example, with agency life, a lot of times the recommendation is like the owner should not be involved in any of the client services. Like you should be, stepping away from that. And while like I believe that is true to a certain degree, it is definitely something like the client strategy that brings me joy. And so I want to keep an element of that in my role at the company, but still allow then space for me to like lead the team, really drive the vision of the business, make sure that everyone is set up to be successful, that we're driving the outcomes we want, that we're developing and building out the services as we should be. So there's pieces that have stayed the same, but I definitely think you shift more from like completely doing and implementing to like leading, guiding, strategizing, building, which is like a big difference for sure. I think for me, you mentioned like when you noticed like things starting to slip, being when you're like, maybe I need some help here. I think another indicator is when you're getting started. I feel like everything is exciting, especially as a solopreneur. And even when I started with just a couple of people on my team, and they were part-time people, so it's not like I had a team of like a bunch of full-time people. I think everything feels like really fun. You're super engaged in all of the activities. You're growing your business. You're leading your own thing. Um, But over time, you definitely start to see the activities that you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. This
Yep.
is not fun for me, right? And so then you're like, okay, like maybe this is where I start to pull someone in to support that actually may enjoy this a lot more than me too, and then can bring more passion and joy and like energy to that task that like I'm starting to lose. Did you feel that way
See,
about anything? What was the first thing? Yeah.
I was about to ask you, like, was anything hard to let go of? And you're like, nope, like, don't like doing this anymore. Take it. Um, no, I'm kidding. But I think something like that the audience needs to know is like, Karen, you and I feel like both very much identify as like perfectionists. So like, I'm sure this was hard for you too, but like for me, like letting go of certain tasks, like even if I didn't enjoy it, like was so hard because I'm like, I just had this mindset of like, well, I'll do it perfectly. Like I don't want to say I didn't trust anyone else, but you know, you kind of want to keep all of your processes and operations like in your own control. So I know, I mean, I, as a fellow perfectionist, I guess I know there were some things you were eager to let go of, but was there anything where that was hard for you and kind of how did you manage that?
Yeah. So shout out to Tess for just organizing our Enneagram lunch and learn. But I did learn that I am part type one, which I like to like consider myself a recovering perfectionist, right? Because if it like progress over perfection, and I think that
Yep.
applies here as well, where you're like, I feel like I feel like I might be able to do it the best, but I know that, like you said, maybe things are slipping, maybe my mental health is suffering, and handing this off to someone else, even if I feel, you know, initially like they can't get it to the point that I might get it to, like it's still better than me doing all of these other things. I think for me, one of the things that was hard to hand off because when I started at ASU, I was in accounting. So I do love the numbers. And then I shifted to graphic design. So I do love the creative design work. And then I moved into marketing. But I feel like the design piece was harder to pass off, but like I was not an expert. So it was like easier in that sense where I'm like, I don't think I'm the best at this, but I do really enjoy it. So it was harder to like pass that off. But it was definitely, there was a time when I'm like, okay, I can't do all of these design services and also, you know, run the business. But yeah, did you have something? Was there something that you were like,
Yes.
please get this out of
I was
my.
gonna say every time you talk about like being good at accounting and the numbers, I'm like I envy you because like I feel like I've mentioned it multiple times on this podcast. Like I just can't do the numbers. That doesn't make sense for me. I'm a writing based person. I'm like a language creative based person. So I definitely like I give you props because I feel like for you like coming into the agency and starting it, you had all these like really well rounded skills. Like you were kind of bringing a bit of knowledge to all the different areas. I'm like hyping you up. But I mean, I think that's something that definitely like makes a strong leader. Like that made you in a position to be able to start and found this agency and be a founder. Do you think that, you know, if someone out there is listening and wants to kind of explore founding and building something themselves, do you think they need to have the skills in all these areas? Like, do you think that's something a good leader has to have? Or do you think, you know, bringing a team on, if there's something you're not knowledgeable about, you know, how would you kind of navigate that and what advice would you give?
Yeah, I could see it going both ways, right? So I do feel, and you reminded me too of a key kind of transition point where when you're first getting started, hiring people that can do a lot. So basically, hiring generalists that can kind of cover a lot of different ground in different areas is really important if you've got like one, two, three people on your team. But as you grow, you do definitely want to start to specialize. So even those generalists can start to narrow in on, like we've talked about before, the zone of genius, right? So what of these
Right.
responsibilities brings you the most joy? What do you feel is like the most energizing, that you feel the best, you know, you perform the best at, and start to specialize even the generalists, but then hiring in specific people for very specific specialized roles, whether that's like a subject matter expert in a certain area, or like from the operational side. So I do think it's important as a smaller team to have people that can kind of cross over. And as a leader, I think it might not be that you need to know how to do all the things, but I do think that flexibility is key because you can't feel that there's things that are beneath you necessarily. Like you need to be able to step into the weeds, especially at the beginning, and like get your hands dirty, get things done. But I think the goal, and depending on, you know, your entrepreneurial style, like you might want to to hire out for that more quickly, or you might want to hang on to it and grow more slowly. So I think that's something that's key to consider too, is, from an agency perspective, a lot of times they refer to them as like a growth agency or a lifestyle agency. And I think that applies across industries. Like, are you trying to grow this and sell it? Or are you trying to create something that allows you to live the life that you want to live? So I chose lifestyle agency from like basically the beginning. And I think that definitely shifts how you, how your role, like what your role looks like within your company, and like how you're, what you're involved in as you grow too, and how quickly you want to grow. But what do
I
you,
think I was going to say a big thing you touched on here too is like the hiring process and bringing people on. And I mean, obviously honored to have been hired and brought on at Radiant. But I kind of want to talk about that too, because I think when you're hiring, like you really have to think about company culture too. And I mean, not to toot our own horn, but I think we have a really positive company culture at Radiant. But like, surely as the founder doing the hiring, that has to be kind of something you're thinking of, and building that company culture day by day. Like that has to be something that's at the forefront, I'd assume.
yeah, I mean, I think that, and I know we talked about this in a couple of other episodes too, but definitely finding someone that has like that X factor. So not just somebody that can do the things that you need them to do, but someone that you feel will be a good fit culturally with your team. And something that I like to say too is like, your culture exists whether you're intentional about it or not. And like from day one, whether it's just you on your team or you have a couple of people, you're already doing things and like being a certain way that's creating that culture and those values. And so like being mindful of like who you are, how you operate is key when you're a small business. Because I think, for me, like I'm very driven, I'm like high achieving, I, like you said, have some perfectionist tendencies. And so some of that like is instilled in the culture, whether I want it to be or not, So like I need to make sure I'm being really intentional about how I'm like what I'm prioritizing and like what values I personally am communicating, because that is going to be like the foundation of your culture. Um, I'm curious, Lauren, your perspective, because thank you for the shout out to our team culture, because that was a big part of why I started my agency. I was, I am definitely also a recovering workaholic. Like I would work, way beyond the hours that I should be working at previous employers. And a lot of times, that could be taken advantage of. And, I think, not having control over outcomes and all of those things was kind of a big deal that made me want to start a separate entity where I could have a focus on mental health and make sure that there is balance and people are appreciated, and what I might have experienced in other positions wasn't happening in my own agency. Not to say like, there's hard days and those things, but I'm curious, like what
Right.
is kind of a standout value or cultural aspect that you notice with Radiant as an employee?
I feel like the biggest thing is that everyone who works at Radiant wants to work at Radiant, and it feels like a very culture that like everyone is driven in the sense of like we feel like we're doing meaningful work.
Mm.
And I think that really like connects to our values and kind of just our mission statement at Radiant. And I feel like that's, that necessarily might not be the case in every single work environment, but I feel like when you're on our calls, like it comes across clear in every single person that every single person is choosing to be there, and they're choosing to, do this work because it aligns with their own values as well. And I feel like that's super important, is kind of, as you're building this brand. Like I even think about myself, kind of as a smaller operation, just kind of as a, a solopreneur, like how important it is to have those like mission statement values and
Mm-hmm.
all of those things defined, because it kind of drives your culture. It drives, how you work. It drives the type of clients you'll end up working with. Like it kind of is at like the core of everything. So I guess that is kind of the biggest takeaway for me at Radiant, is like that I align with that, and I think everyone who works there does, which is important.
I love that. Thank you for saying that, because that does like our kind of more recently, like slightly repolished vision of creating that ripple effect of wellness, I think is such a core aspect of our brand, that like we are doing meaningful work. Like sometimes you might get stuck in the minutia of the day to day, but like in the end, the work that we're doing has an impact, and how we are being with our clients, with each other, all has an opportunity to create a positive interaction or a movement in the right direction in one way or another. So I think there's like things that are infused into like the day to day that become a part of the culture, are a part of the culture. And then I think there are like simple things that like can serve as reminders. Like when we have our all hands calls, we like review our values, we review our vision and mission statements. And I think those are nice like little refreshers too that are more tactical and like keeping that at the forefront of what we're doing. And like those can like change a little bit, right? Like I don't think that like everything stays completely stagnant. I think some of that can evolve a bit as you grow, but I think it is important to like establish that at the beginning and have like a foundation for that too. So as you scale, like you don't lose sight of those things.
That actually, funny enough, what leads me to another question I have for you. So like obviously we're talking today about like how a founder evolves. Do you think, like, has there been times, obviously Radiant's been almost 11 years now in the making and running. Obviously people evolve over the course of 11 years. Has there ever been times for you as a founder where you've been like, I've evolved, I feel like now there's things I need to put in place to help the people on my team evolve or kind of meet this new standard or this new kind of, way of doing things that I've evolved to do? Is that ever, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And here we are, Lauren, with our shout out to systems, right? Systems and processes. I think that's such an important piece is like having some systems in place that allow people to follow certain certain steps or processes to deliver on services or for internal purposes. And that like that's not to say we remove the creativity from everything we do, but it gives them really good guidelines, builds their confidence because they're following like a proven way of doing things. And I think that helps to eliminate too some of that gray area that can reduce quality or create a gap in what we're expecting and what's actually delivered. So processes for sure. Like we have our Radiant resource library, we have our templates, we've got our business best practice guides, and then we have like our SOPs that are more like the step-by-step stuff. So having those types of things for kind of your core activities is really important. And then we did just launch a new initiative that was focused on like the blueprint of strategic excellence. So really pursuing excellence in everything that we do. And so there's components of that that we're building out and that the team is like tuning into to make sure that what we're providing and what we're how we're working is always not necessarily trying to be perfect, but really trying to be excellent. So I think there's a lot that as you grow you can continue to evolve and build into your business that helps support all of that and scale effectively. But I
And
had a
that's, I feel
question
like
for
that's an
you.
important, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I had a question for you because we were talking about values and vision and kind of like starting to, potentially lose touch with things as you grow your brand. And so I think as a small business, you have like a huge advantage in being more involved in a lot of things. And you and I were chatting a couple weeks back about your involvement on brand with Jimmy Fallon and how one of your key takeaways was about how the executive leadership was involved in marketing decisions. Can you kind of touch on that and like what you learned from that experience?
Yeah, that was like the peek behind the curtain for me where I was like, I am like pro small business all the way. Like, I love a small agency. I love small agency life. I really, being on brand, I had such like a unique opportunity to have face to face time with these, amazing CMOs who in a normal world I would not be in the same room as. And I think my biggest takeaway was that at a certain point, you when you are leading a team of so many people and you're doing so many things, like it is so easy for you to become so far removed from it that it's you really need to let the people that are at the core and at the root and specialists like make the decisions. Because there was so many times where I would see, a CMO who I'm like, I could tell you're not scrolling on TikTok, like you don't use the language, like you're not up with like Gen Z millennial language and trends, and they would make a suggestion or make a recommendation that I'm like, that just absolutely does not align with like the current world and climate of marketing.
Mhm.
And it's absolutely no disrespect to them, but there comes a certain point when you are managing and in charge of so many things that you can't have your finger on every single pulse in all departments. So I feel like that was such a like eye-opening moment for me where I was like, as a founder, like you need to be able to evolve in the sense of like having full trust and respecting your team's decision and knowing that they're going to do the best for your brand, because it could almost end up hurting your brand when you are, trying to dictate and make all of these decisions without maybe, necessarily being the best person to do that. So it was very eye-opening for sure.
Yeah, I love that. That reminds me too of some of the work we do in the discovery phase with new clients, where we're actually like interview their customers or other internal, whether that's stakeholders or just other team members on their team, and we always uncover things that like leadership may not have recognized or was aware of that like is very powerful, and then communicating their message or leveraging the different marketing channels to like help with conversions. I think that's like something that, like you said, like you have to make sure, and I see this even with a small team of like 10 people, that like there are certain people that know better than me, and that's what you want to hire for, right? You want someone that can do the job better than you, that's smarter than you at that specific thing. And so when you have that person in place, like you definitely have to let go of some of that control and let them make those decisions or make those recommendations, and then follow through with what they're suggesting in a lot of cases. Because like again, like I don't want to be the one that's on social media every day understanding the like very hot in the moment trends that we should be taking advantage of. I want my social media manager to understand that. I want to make sure that I have somebody that like, boots on the ground, ears to the ground, that can like make those recommendations. And even like I said, at the smaller agency level, like I feel like you can start to experience that. So I can only imagine, as that grows and there's more and more layers of management, like if people at the top are making those big decisions that are like so far separated from what they do and know, even like if that's personally, that I think that could be detrimental to a brand.
I think too, it kind of like you have to look at it as like what is a healthy detachment and what's like abandonment, because that's something I've had to learn, where there's been times where I've tried to let go of a task or step away, and like instead of detaching from it and still, supervising from afar and kind of, letting people do it, like I almost end up abandoning it. Like I had this kind of issue recently where me being bad at math, I was trying to have more systems in place to help with my finances, and I kind of took it too far and just went like the whole abandonment route, where I was like, someone else got it, like I don't have to worry about it,
Mm-hmm.
someone else is doing that job. And I ended up catching a mistake like a week later that was something that I definitely should have caught, just doing my normal oversight. So I think that's definitely like a challenge for at least me as a founder, is that like what is that balance between like I could healthily detach from this, or I'm like totally abandoning it.
Yeah, well, I mean, to your point, like I think it's easy once you have an opportunity to like leave a task behind or like leave some responsibilities to somebody else, to be like, peace out, like no longer care about this. So yeah, definitely finding a balance to like still have like some like regular checkpoints, or understand. It kind of reminds me of the RACI matrix, right? There's responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. So in those cases, like you might want to stay informed like at a certain level so that you can understand what's going on and catch those types of mistakes, versus like completely abandoning all of the all of the responsibility and oversight.
Right, yeah, I have the desire to peace out sometimes, as I'm sure we all do. Looking for you going forward as a founder, is there any area right now where you're like, I'm seeing opportunity to bring more people onto the team? Like, is there a way that you kind of are able to pick out like, hey, I'm evolving, Radiant's evolving. Like, is there any areas that you've noticed you might need to bring in more people, and kind of how do you go about flagging that and catching that?
Yeah, so I mean, I do definitely feel like some of it is relying on my gut instinct based on, experience in this space. I think a lot of it is based also on demand. Like if we're looking at client services and we're starting to notice some trends in a specific area, again, like industry movement, like with AI, like are we fully equipped there? So I think there's like the industry component, there's the client component, and then there's like my gut instinct component that kind of all come together to help me decide like, hey, do we maybe need to like up our hours and capacity and teams member responsibilities in this area. But I mean, it's definitely hard. Like, and some of it's trial and error, and especially in a space like digital marketing where things do change so quickly. Like, you have to be ready to scale or pivot or pull back in different ways. So I know that doesn't always apply to everybody, but I do think that comes back to kind of hiring strategically and intentionally, and then also firing fast too. I think we'll talk about this in another episode, but I think that's a key piece. Is sometimes you might maybe want to look at hiring in contractors for more temporary work versus employees that are more like long term. So there's a lot of different pieces to consider, but I think those three kind of components, industry, client, and gut, are very important.
Yeah. I feel like we talk about the gut a lot here because truly I think like 80% of being a founder sometimes literally just feels like
Yeah.
trusting your gut, which is like, I wish it was
Right.
a better process, but
I wonder, there's like all the gut axes, right? Like, is there a gut entrepreneurial axis? Like, there's the gut brain axis, the gut business axis. Is that a thing?
surely there surely has to. I'm like, anyone who's listening is founding is like, okay, so it all just comes down to my gut, and what else do we talk about in every other episode? Like processes.
Samples.
I'm like, your gut and processes
Oh, yeah.
is literally all you need. Well, we want to kind of just recap what we talked about here today, so you could kind of have some takeaways. But again, also like we always encourage you to take a look at your own marketing and kind of take a chance to, audit and look at what you're doing. So I think the biggest thing here is we're looking at scaling without losing your voice or your values. We talked about that mission statement and having, core values today a little bit too, is, be able to shift your role. So move away from the executor to visionary, decision maker, have that, what do we call it? Healthy detachment, not, not abandonment. I think that's a big one we learned today. Of course, you want to document your brand too along the way. So have like a clear brand voice, have messaging, and have those guidelines because, like we said, as a founder, you evolve, which could cause your brand to evolve. So, keeping kind of track of all of these things along the way. I know, Karen, you talked a little bit about having some of those core documents and processes in place. The more that you could have documented, I think is absolutely going to help you. We also want to make sure that you empower the right people. So hire, transfer ownership, trust your team members. Like Karen said, it comes down to your gut, and making sure that you trust your instincts there. And protect your vision. So stay focused on the direction and the values and your long-term growth, not just the day-to-day operations. Having that mission statement, protecting your company culture, all of those things are super, super important. Karen, is there anything else you kind of wanted to chime in or maybe challenge people to do some more things to audit their marketing this week before we wrap up?
I mean, I think you covered it. This was a fun topic. Thanks, Lauren.
Yay. Okay. Well, before you go, make sure you check out our website to learn more about Radiant and how we help brands grow with intention. And you could even read a little bit about kind of our mission statement and what we talked about today on there too. Follow us on social. We are on LinkedIn. We are on TikTok. We are on Instagram and Facebook. And if you love today's episode, of course, you could stream on Apple or Spotify. Also, if you're listening, leave us a review. Give us 5 stars. Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And you could always stream the video version on YouTube as well. And thank you guys just for hanging out with us today. And until next time, stay radiant.
Stay radiant.